I know this is a topic close to heart to many of you. And I have to make a confession here. This idea was created based on a conversation I had with Wade a few months ago when I visited him in Washington about many challenges we have in managing parliamentary operations. So this is what we're trying to focus here. The idea is not to have an IT kind of discussion, it's more focused on the business side, on how to manage these processes. So the idea is I wrote a few questions for each one of you. I will invite each one of you to answer, and then I will invite all the other colleagues to share their thoughts and comments as well in sequence. The idea is each of your remarks to last about 5 minutes. I think it's enough time for everyone to develop the reasoning about the argument. So basically today we gathered to delve on the heart of parliamentary operations, which is the request management. This function, as I was looking, is as ancient as the institution itself, and it has been the silent guardian of our processes, ensuring the operations run smoothly and efficiently. However, the pace of time has brought with it an array of challenges that this foundational pillar must navigate in our rapidly evolving era. As we stand on the edge of tradition on one side and transformation on the other, we need to examine the nuanced balance of honoring our time-tested traditions while embracing the cutting-edge technologies and strategies that the present holds. So I will invite each one of you to introduce yourself first, very briefly, and tell us a little bit on your interest in this particular topic. So let's do this alphabetically. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself to the colleagues that are just watching us and tell us your connection to this topic?
Well, like you said, Luis, this is a near and dear topic to my heart and to the House of Commons of Canada. As a service provider, obviously requests are the nature of our business. We're satisfying, I'd say probably close to 1,000 requests a day across a very vast landscape of services we offer members of Parliament in Canada. And if I was just going to zero in on some legislative requests, even those alone are monumental in number, that cover a vast array of colleagues from our procedural services to our IT department. So all that to say is I have a very keen interest in this subject and look forward to a great debate.
Thank you so much, Chris. Ludovic, would you like to share, introduce yourself actually to the colleagues?
Hi, so I'm Ludovic Delepiné, and currently I'm leading the archives from the European Parliament, which is my new life, but I had a previous one in the IT domain, and I introduced IT portfolio management in the Directorate General for Innovation, Technologies and Technological Support. And I'm leading the IT Governance Hub for the Center for Innovation in Parliament since 7 years now, where service management is one of the dimensions that we address, of course. So it's, let's call me a service manager veteran, if you want. But yeah, it's definitively a topic which is close to my heart, that I'm following continuously.
Thank you so much, Ludovic. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Luis. I'm Mark Stodder, president of Xcential Legislative Technologies. And we spend an awful lot of time thinking about the challenges that legislative drafters, parliamentary council have when it comes to technology, and how to make systems more efficient and accurate and more transparent when a company works around the world with many of the folks who are types of folks who are on this panel today. Do a lot of work in the U.S. House, California, and other governments. And so we're always interested in thinking about how we can help the process work better, and how we can solve some of the vexing challenges that arise in this process. And I apologize in advance for the sound. The lunch is starting to fire up. The pizza shop is opening. The music is on, so I'll use mute a lot.
Thank you so much, Mark. Wade, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Luis. I'm Wade Ballou. I'm the Legislative Counsel for the U.S. House of Representatives. And as Luis already indicated, this came from a conversation that he and I had a couple of years ago. I'll confess that Luis has the advantage. He was taking really good notes, and mine are much more sparse. But my particular focus is on requests for assistance for producing legislative drafts. So, it's not as broad as some of the other of you, although I suspect that we have a lot of issues in common. So I'm looking forward to learning from my colleagues here in this panel.
Thank you so much, Wade, for your introduction. And allow me to bring my first question to you specifically. What are some of the specific challenges your department, which is the Office of the Legislative Counsel, which is responsible for drafting legislation, providing legal counsel for members, what are the specific challenges you face in efficiently managing and prioritizing the internal requests for legislative services, and how do these challenges impact the overall functionality and responsiveness of Congress and specifically in the House of Representatives?
Thank you, Luis, for that question. And I'm going to begin somewhat broadly with just the basics of what we need for from our intake system. The system itself must help us assign responsibility for the request to a team, and then be able to provide for accountability when issues come up. So the responsibility is really having an intake system and process that's appropriate for the size of the tasks that we have in front of us, assigning each of those requests to the appropriate team with an indication of the proper priority that goes along with that request. And to do this in a very timely manner, especially for those high priority items. And then on the accountability side, the requester needs to be notified that we actually have that request, so they know it made it through the kind of atmosphere out there and landed with somebody who's responsible. And then for us knowing who is responsible and for them knowing that they have the request. So it's that basic communication. A one-way communication does not succeed. You really have to have the confirmation for both to succeed. And then the system that we use is based on our organization and responsibility for our work. So we organize primarily by subject matter teams, and within that, then our teams have direct responsibility and communication with our committee clients, and then they receive requests from members generally through our front system. In addition, I receive requests from time to time, as do a few other of the principals in our office, directly from leadership, and I then need to be able to pass that request along as appropriate. Our system itself developed over time. It began with a simple combination of a walk-in system and telephone system, where a request was simply placed in a common box, and the attorneys would come along, look through that box, and pull out a request that they felt like working on. That worked well for the attorneys, not so well for the requesters in terms of getting work back in a timely manner. Over time, as we specialized and as our teams formed, then that system was replaced primarily by a telephone referral system, and the attorneys would receive a simple phone message that, so-and-so had a request, you need to call them. Today, we are dealing with a document management system that is comprised of only part of a solution. And so on our committee side, we have decentralization, which means that I, as the manager, do not know at any moment in time where a request is and who has it. I have to investigate. On the member side, it's much more of a central system where I can look at a screen, I can do some inquiries, and I can know who is responsible for that request. And that is based on metadata. And so kind of our real overall challenge now is bringing together that system into one overall centralized method that works efficiently both for the requester and for the team, that allows a proper management and doesn't take any time at all, if at all possible. So that will be my challenge, I think, going forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Wade. Ludovic, as you mentioned, you are the head of archives in the EU Parliament, but you also have an experience with IT. And before that, do you face similar challenges in the archives? And how can you comment on that on top of what Wade just said? You're on mute, Ludovic. Okay.
On the way. So I would say I will maybe take one step back compared to a more specific business. And I manage the IT portfolio management process for the European Parliament for almost 10 years. I allocated €1 billion on IT projects and services. And I built my own experience on what were the challenges and what were the constraints we had to face. And I went a little bit inside the literature to see, okay, this was my feeling, but was I really the only one facing this kind of thing? So at this time being, I was leading the interinstitutional committee for portfolio management and information systems. So we exchange with the other entities from the European institutions and the other, let's say, CIOs. And more recently, I took a book which is called Digital Government Excellence by Xcential, and he made the interviews of several effective digital leaders from a little bit all over the world. For instance, in Brazil, it was Luís Felipe Monteiro, or in Canada, it was Hilary Hartley. And in fact, we all come to the same conclusion. If you want to lead to a digital excellence, there's one thing you need to ensure as a service provider: delivery, delivery, delivery. That's really the key message. If you don't deliver, you will lose trust from your clients. So if you set up software, processes, and organization, documents, whatever you need in order to streamline the demands, to have them channeled in one way, and we'll take a little bit later on how to do that for some domains. But in order to maintain this trust, you need to deliver. Because if you do not deliver, you will then create expectations and your client will wait. And then there will be a huge, huge deception, and they'll get angry and they will not come to you. So if you create trust, you create control. If you lose trust, you create shadow IT. Because people will need to change, because they will rely on digital transformation for whatever reason it is, because their resources will be less, because their objectives will be higher, because they will face to the evolution, the legal evolution of their domain. So they will need to change. But if you're not there to support them, then in this case, they will not trust you anymore and they will leave. And some of the effects that could happen in this context is what I have seen in between 2009 and 2019, which is that when I started to set up this kind of process, IT portfolio management, because the IT was really decentralized. So everybody was working on its own. There was no IT enterprise architecture. So there was no common principle to guide everybody in the same way so that we apply the same principle, and we created a sustainable environment in terms of IT solutions. And with this process that was quite successful initially, we realized to centralize more IT support or IT development and IT change management, and to leave aside some identified places where people could develop IT solutions locally, part of information systems, and then putting them under control so that we ensure that scope, time, resources were aligned with throughout all these changes. And throughout the time, there was an increase in the requests. There was a lack of capacity to answer. There were different orientations that were taken. We lose a little bit of strategy, and then the trust started to leave. And the portfolio pipeline started to be full of projects or ideas, because that are demands or requests that were not delivered and that even were not addressed. And the ones that were requested in the past were not addressed either, because you know that we have a yearly budgetary annual process. We receive budget every year. So we get a process which is relaunched almost every year. And in this context, in fact, the backlog of the ideas that were not addressed in the previous years were added on top of the one that were to be treated on the year. So then there was a huge bench of ideas and demands that were not satisfied. Clients started to lose trust in the process, and shadow IT started again. So we have seen another movement of decentralization, by which people say, okay, if you are not able to supply me with what I need, then I do it myself. I have my budget, I hide it into maybe places where I could do something else, but still the purpose of the budget line corresponds to what I want to change, and then I'm financing my own ID. So I would say having a little bit higher view, the most important thing, whatever you do in service management, whether it is particularly change management, is to deliver. That's the key message, and it supports you. If you deliver, you can do whatever you want. If you don't, you're dead.
Thank you so much, Ludovic, for your comments. I would have much to say, but I will yield the floor to Chris first. Chris, I know you have a lot to comment on that.
Oh, wow, Ludovic, what a great start to kick me off. I mean, here's a great contemplation. When we look at the word request, it's so vast in terms of who's requesting. And that's actually the epiphany we've had at the House of Commons of Canada over the last few strategic plans that we've published to all Canadians, really, is really who do we serve? And certainly from a client making requests, we've unanimously, as an organization, ebbed and flowed through understanding the clients we serve as service providers. But like you, Ludovic, as a digital legislative professional, I have many clientele. I serve the people who serve our clients. I serve our clients directly. So it's really, it's an exchange of value. I call it a value chain of delivering requests to enable all of us to serve our clients better. But inherently, a lot of the things Ludovic mentioned around shadow IT, trust, and maintaining, let's say, a lean but mean portfolio to sustain that of products and services, we have to make trade-offs, because we can't satisfy it all. We never have the capacity to manage the demand that truly will come from our members of parliament, our elected representatives, and then the entire fleet of personnel that serve them, all who require digital as a foundation to deliver their services. So we have a job for life, which is a tough one, Ludovic, in terms as digital stewards here, because we can never make everyone happy. And that's the hardest job in request management, is how do we balance that prerogative that is just a really interesting one. So I wanted to share with you 3 challenges that I have examples that I hope resonate. And I did put it in the lens of not as my fellow service providers in my service areas, but as my true client, our members of parliament, their staff, the research offices. What kind of requests do we get from them to all of us in the House of Commons of Canada? And what challenges pull us in different angles that deal with requests. I'll give you the first one. In every strategic plan we ever put, the first thing we have is nonpartisanship. Is we as stewards of Parliament must maintain an equal, unabashed representation of representing all parties equally in their mandate to serve Canadians in our context. But often we'll get requests from our clients, our members of Parliament, who are obviously representative of certain parties, to deliver certain services that always question our impartiality. But you want to serve your client, you want to deliver a great service, and you want to satisfy those requests. But how can I, as a steward, look at those more broadly to say, is this something I can offer all members of Parliament, regardless of political leaning? Is this something of value? So the example we have is a lot of our whips, in terms of a role across the parties, have been pleading for support from our organization around capabilities to enable them to do their function better as a steward of their party. And so, for example, we did do some initial prototypes and examples of a whip app that allows, and again, we can only do so much in terms of being impartial to all, but we were able to provide one of our parties and a consultant with some data that all parties would have access to, that they could then tap into from our digital landscape that could enable them to deliver that request better. So these are some of the very fine, delicate challenges we have to wade through in terms of satisfying a request, finding an optimal solution to a very complex and very mandate infringing delivery. So, and I'm just saying, some of those examples we look at entertaining more broadly with the parties to say, is this something that we could put in place for all to enjoy? And then that's where we leave it to our board decisions to say, is this something that could unilaterally add value? So the WIP product and service is still one in discussion today, but I just wanted to show you one of the challenges around impartiality, nonpartisanship. Another is, like Ludovic said, deliver, deliver, deliver. It doesn't matter if it's an internal client or true clients, is turnaround times mean everything. Speed to delivery is everything. And Ludovic, we didn't compare notes, so we know that this is the truth here. And I'll give you an example of a very hot service and app that we've launched since the pandemic, during the pandemic, is our electronic voting app. And that one, when there's an issue, when there's a concern, we're talking real-time expectations of turnarounds on incidents, on helping our members understand if there's technical difficulties, on satisfying new features. The expectations of us as service providers to deliver on these issue resolutions, new features, general consultations about how the app works so that they can use it properly or find ways, interesting ways around things, is something where, again, we're pushed into very quick turnaround times from request management perspective, and our entire organization has to get behind the ability to satisfy these. The last one I'll say is a challenge is, of course, take that one example, two examples I've shown, and then throw another 100 concurrently that we have at the same time. Competing priorities are a constant in our organization. And back to Ludovic's point around having a sound understanding of our portfolio, our service level agreements, where our clients are in terms of escalation priorities, is so important for us as service providers to know on a dime when we need to shift priority, because we don't have the luxury to call another meeting or pull some governance together. We need to know our pecking order at all times to be agile as a service provider. Thank you, Luís.
Thank you so much, Chris, for your considerations. Mark, I know you don't work in the Parliament, but you have such a vast experience working with so many parliaments. How do you see this issue?
Well, and actually where we work as a company is sort of between the sets of panelists here. We help the technical staff meet the priorities, do the projects, but then we also work with teams like Wade's to create more efficiencies, help them do their jobs better. So we kind of sit in between. And so when I think about requests, there are lots of different kinds of requests. There's the request that Wade's office is dealing with to draft legislation, where he's seeing volume increases like never before. The what's coming into the office, what he has to deal with, just like so many council across the country and around the world are seeing increases. And so there is pressure to perform, pressure to meet the priorities there. But then the technical side, increasing pressure to digitize further, to create the applications that leadership or those further down. One of the things, and so I guess when I think about those two sets of challenges, along with the deliver imperative, Wade's team needs to deliver and the ITC staff needs to deliver. They also need to communicate, and there also needs to be clear communication throughout. One of the things that we often see with governments, some smaller governments, country and US states, is gulfs of communication between the technical staff and the professional drafting teams, for example, or leadership, where there's not understanding of mutual priorities. There's not an understanding of the technical backlog, the work that has already been approved and budgeted for, and a plan might be made by the technical staff to get certain things done. New leadership comes in, or leadership has a different issue suddenly come up. Those priorities get wiped away, and you have to spin again. It's very difficult to deliver. And so I have found the best offices, the ones that are most effective, have developed ways, forms where you can always be identifying, always be understanding back and forth what the needs are, with the understanding that certain sudden issues will come up, like perhaps a pandemic that will change everything in your technical strategies. So I think this is a terrific panel to understand and think about this wide range of requests that kind of cross all of these disciplines here for us. So those are my first thoughts, and I look forward to diving in further.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your closing considerations on this round. Ludovic, I'd like to bring to you the next question. I get the impression sometimes that many of these processes, they are rooted in traditions forever, and we actually don't know where this came from. In many cases, we see that we ask for colleagues, but why do we do things this way? And they actually don't know, because this is always has been the way. So we have these time-honored traditions in Parliament, and they often operate on these, what I would call legacy processes. They have been in place for, maybe in the EU Parliament for decades, but for example, in the House of Commons and many other countries for centuries even. So when it comes to request management, how have these, let's say, historical structures influenced the current approach in your department, in your case, the archives? And how do these traditional processes either support or challenge the department in meeting the diverse and multifaceted needs of the institution itself? What would you say about this specific topic?
Well, we said first thing, if you don't want to work for me, say that it has always been like that and we cannot change things. And if you say that in an interview in front of me, you're pretty sure you'll never work for me. That's the only argument I will not accept. We can always change things, always. Then we have to figure out how. But I would say that for the impact of these historical structures on request and demand management, I would start with 3 remarks that we have very often. The first one is, why not mine? When you're talking about ID management or let's say demand selection, prioritization, why not mine? The second one is, the boss is always first. We couldn't call that VIPs. Let me say the boss is always first. And the third one is, will I get it before I retire? That's the third point. So how did we address that? The first one, and it was also mentioned by the other panelists, why not mine? Why do you choose a specific demand and not mine? And this is something that we hear very, very often. And the answer is a fair process. What you need to build in order to try to manage the resistance of these historical structures that were always served and some that were never, and you want to put a kind of equal footing. And with there with equality, right? It's not that you will give the same resources or the same demands to all your requesters. You want to be equal with all of them, equality. And then in this case, you build a fair process that will help you to bring transparency and that you will use as a communication tool. And transparency is extremely important. You can accept not to be chosen only if you know how was the process that lead to the rejection of your demand. If you're in, you're happy, whatever happened. So you could say whatever you want. People say that they are inside the portfolio, they've been chosen. It will be transferred from an idea to a project or change management. Fair enough, they're super glad, but you have to manage the ones which are not inside. And for these ones, transparency and communication are really two major criterion for let's say trying to avoid this resistance that you had in the history. The second one, the boss is always right and the boss is always first. When you think that your clients are all the same and are equal footed, that's wrong. I'm terribly sorry. It may seem a little bit abrupt, but that's wrong. They are not equal footing. When the Secretary General asks for a project, he doesn't ask your opinion whether you think it could be good to do. He asks you to do it. So he may be extremely nice, extremely gentle by having a very nice sentence saying, would you be kind to think about and what? No, but you have to understand that, please do. That's something. So if you don't integrate in your process that you have clients that you treat on equal footing and that you have some VIPs that you have to serve, even if they are super nice when making a request, then you are in a serious difficulty. And how I solved that, and I did that during 10 years, and I know it was not necessarily continued by my successor with some small consequences. But how did I address that? I defined, let's say, a balance inside the portfolio. I say, okay, let's have 30% of investment in our resources and 70% for business as usual. So business as usual is everything which is recurrent, providing computers, providing phones, let's say everything that you have around small maintenance of information systems, all these things, 70% because we are an administration. So we don't expect to change permanently all the organization. We need to change, but then we need to absorb the change and then really take benefit from this change. So 70% for the balance and then 30% for the investments, change management, programs, projects, you can call that, or you can classify that all they want. And then you have within this 30%, a little bit of 2%, which are booked for the VIPs. So this budget is not available for anybody. This is only targeted for your VIP to address demands and have on a permanent basis a resource capacity. And when I mean resource capacity, it's not necessarily budget capacity. This is staff capacity. Because when your boss asks you for something, he doesn't ask you to think about something that will start in 6 months. He asks you for something that starts now, very often with a hard deadline, because you have elections, because you have a specific event, because you want to modernize the process or digitalize something. So you have to start now. And if you want to start now, you need to have staff, external staff or official staff, whatever you want, but people need to be there. So I built a entire team that was specially dedicated for VIPs, always up. They raise a question, we have the answer, and never know how to, always. That's the second point. And the third one is, will I get it before I retire? Because when you are managing demands, very often you have all the set of demands that will grow throughout time because it goes a little bit faster than what you can deliver. Even still, you can deliver, but you cannot satisfy all of them. And the way we address that was to try to define corporate solutions. Say, okay, we have some recurrent requests. And then if we want to absorb them, I want to manage documents. Well, we are a huge document industry, right? We're not producing cars, very few bikes, but documents, tons and tons or terabytes. So when we have very often same demands that coming from different clients that ignore the demands from the other one. So you expose all the demands, you classify them, try in kind of problem management, try to identify the ones which are recurrent and to address them with standard solutions. Say, okay, you want to manage your documents or you want to manage meetings or exchange in such a way, fair enough, go to this solution. It is service management based, we'll solve it right now. So trying to classify them with corporate solutions.
Thank you so much, Ludovic, for your response. Mark, I saw in your face, I imagine you have some comments on that as well.
Yeah, a couple. Although the last point you made, Ludovic, about will you do this before you retire? I've often heard from managers, yes, we can do a modernization program after I retire, not while I'm still here. So many of the projects we've been involved in or observed, you really are walking through somewhat of a minefield when you think about change management, because you're obviously having to deal with power. Who's the boss? The Secretary General says, today I want this, and you have to do it. But then you're also walking through a minefield of rules that go way back and traditions. And then you're also walking through a minefield of unintended consequences. That when you perhaps modernize something about how documents are produced, how they can be done more efficiently, that can sometimes mean you will actually have the consequence. And I think, Wade, you and I have talked about this before, about how that can mean volume will increase. People expect you to be able to produce more in an office because you've been given more efficiency. And so that can be a consequence you're not ready for. I think one of the key things we have seen, and it's really fairly standard with technology improvements and modernizations, is of course to pay extreme attention to change management, because you're changing people's lives, how they do their jobs. And we've often seen technology projects fail or not do as well because there was not enough attention given to that. New technology was touched in front of office without really thinking through what would happen, how things would change. And you have to be, of course, as I said at the start, especially careful in the legislative environment, because sometimes that will actually have an unintended consequence of meaning rules need to change because certain processes. So I think there are so many things to consider in this question, but the main one for me is to be extremely conscious of just what the changes will be when you bring the.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your comments. Wade, would you like to comment on this topic as well?
Boy, I really appreciate both of the comments and observations so far, because it really describes our current challenge. So I described our system politically. What's happening with us, and I think around the world as well, is that our former system of operation was committee-centric, leadership-driven, and now there's a much more of a pressure to have the system be member-driven. And with that comes the demand on the member side for more draft requests. And politically, it's one thing to be able to move in that direction. It can move much faster than our systems are able to handle it. Particularly, it's much faster than the people who actually produce the work are able to handle it. So it really addresses that change management problem. Number one, just recognizing it. Is this a permanent change? Is this a temporary thing that you just wait and the system will somehow go back to where it was? At what point do you act? And then within that change, there is an awful lot of why not mine? And that is much more now member driven, and yet our priorities in terms of what we are required to do by law has the committee oriented first in terms of where the effort goes into resources. So that is very much front and centered. For us, the bosses first is very much kind of captures that leadership oriented mandate and directive when leadership is able to command what comes to the floor, what will be considered in debate, and then ultimately at least the subject matters of what will pass in the House. right now, we have a very thin majority, and so there's much more robust and active participation by our members, making the schedule uncertain, making the process more chaotic. For us, then there is I think, resultant confusion as to what really is the priority, what really should be worked on, because my years of experience in identifying what's moving and what not are now, at least at the moment, worthless. I'm not able to predict the next moment almost. So a real challenge there. And that really puts a lot of pressure on the fairness and the transparency, because part of our role, not only are we nonpartisan, but we maintain confidentiality with each of our requesters. And when I tell a requester, well, you're going to have to wait because we're working on a higher priority, but I can't tell them what it is or why, then that creates a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of accusations of actually you are partisan, you're choosing the other over me. And so that people part is a real challenge for us. And again, on the people part, because of the way we're structured, we are really operating with each of the teams having the direct contact with committees and the members. And so they are having to manage this stress on top of doing the drafting work. And it's taking a real human toll. And so as we think about request management, how to do some of what was suggested with the fairness, when will I get it before I retire in my next life, whenever that is, figuring out how to do that and give the teams the space that they need to work and not deal with this emotional overload that comes with it is a real challenge for us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Wade, for your comments. Chris, I will invite you to close this round, but I wanted to add an extra layer of difficulty on your answer, bringing on what Ludovic, Mark, and Wade just said. On one hand, you have VIPs, you have very important persons, you have, let's say, party leaders, bloc leaders, parliamentarians that are on leadership positions. But on the other hand, as we discussed on Monday, you have the democratic governance in parliaments, which in many cases, leadership changes every year, every 2 years, which is a very short time to do what we're proposing to do here. And how do you manage that? Because you can start a project and let's say in a few months or in 2 years, you can be asked, okay, stop that. I'm the new leader, I'm asking you to do this way. But in another two years, you can have that previous leader coming back and asking you to scrap everything you've done in the middle and return to the original request. So in addition to comment on what the colleague just said, please feel free to add this extra layer of complexity on your work.
Thanks, Luis, for keeping me on my toes with the curveball. A good thing I listened very closely to Wade's comments, because otherwise I'd say, help me out, guys. But totally, actually, Wade made a great comment. The people prerogative, the people element, the human-centric side of it all. And Luis, your interjection here, the philosophy behind all of this is we build relationships with people. And if those people are shifting and changing, I'll tell you straight up, although we have like everything, VIPs, a whole series of different ways to interact with our clients and our services, there's still an element of humans interacting and providing and delivering services and building trust, even as requester and fulfiller of service. There's still an exchange and interaction that happens between two people or two parties, I'll say. And when you have to reestablish those relationships, things don't come for free from the beginning. And there's the wiggle room and ability to navigate through a difficult scenario, like Wade was saying, is you have an impossible scenario where you can't disclose a lot of information, but you build the trust with someone and they understand you and respect you because you've gained their credibility. So that's where I'll say the greatest challenge, and we always confront that here in our legislature is, oh boy, we just had a cabinet shuffle, actually, true story, this summer. So we're having to reestablish some of those relationships this fall. And we know that it's going to take a period of time before we're able to move business through the corridors here in a manner that we had in the past. So Luis, I can't understate the value of having great processes, great request management, great service management, but also great relationship management is a key piece there. But if I may, I'll go back to my written notes, which I'd love to tackle what I kind of boiled this question down of the old meets the new, tradition, time-honored, historic constructs of our legislatures to digital innovation, AI advancements, innovations. Like how are we bridging the two hemispheres to a future that honors, respects, learns, and values all of that while offering something that is leveraging the latest capabilities in the world around us? So again, Ludovic, no easy job for digital professionals like us who are trying to, dance in both worlds. But I'll give you some examples that I want to share with you where we're trying to strike that balance. One that comes to mind right away is our heritage collection. So we have an amazing collection at the House of Commons of Canada of all of our art, our history, very traditional stuff. And how have we respected these time-honored traditions since the inception of our institution? But in a modern way that is captivating our audiences, not just members who'd love to request and see some of our artifacts and showcase them in their offices and have a great, even just educational session around understanding the heritage of the House of Commons of Canada. How do we balance that with modern abilities to request these services, to display these products, to allow our curatorial services to showcase them with modern technology and constructs? So we partnered with actually some of the leading museums in the world, Smithsonian and otherwise, with it goes back to my debate this morning, platforms versus bespoke point solutions. In some cases, it's okay from if you're the curator and you're offering this wonderful historic service, that we're not just giving them a very generic way to showcase this amazing heritage of our organization. We brought in one of the leading curatorial systems in the world to allow that office, to that service area, to showcase these products. So we've put a state-of-the-art website and an interaction capability for not just members of Parliament, but the public in Canada as well, to be able to understand our heritage, to be able to see these traditions in play. And when they come and visit us on the hill here behind me, they're able to engage better in that way. So that's democracy at work here. And I think it's a nice example of looking at requests, looking at heritage and tradition, while looking also at some of those new elements at play that we can improve a service through digital.
Luis,
Yeah, Luis, just a quick point to add on to that theme of kind of looking backwards and forwards at the same time. One of the things that we've tried to do, and I think it worked out very well, is that bring in new innovations, new ways of doing things. Make sure you're still pointing backwards, like pointing to the traditions, and even the simplest ways. One of the projects we've done for office now, from ways of things. So we have helped move forward from very old legacy technology. One of the things the law advisors we do is use cards to try and change it along. And so in the new system, you click, you're opening a card, and you're looking at the card. And another implementation for state government, they've always used about 8 different colors of pencil to note the changes they're making to graphs. So and each color means something very significant. So we implemented a system so we track changes. There was these different colors exactly. So there's ways that you can integrate the past with what you're doing present and moving forward against the system. I think it's very important for keeping that change with that. All of that being sensitive to people want.
If I could just build one comment onto Mark's, Luis, if I could steal 30 more seconds, it's really, we have one of these time-honored ways, color-coded pencils, very similar to a long-standing tradition of written questions. You know, you have oral questions, question period in our chamber. We have written questions that are still written. And what we've done to bring the duality of respecting the tradition of written questions, not typed questions. We don't want to change even the wording and the standing orders. These are still written questions. And we brought in OCR technology and character recognition so that we can digitize and still honor the tradition while digitizing and using that data. Obviously, we need those questions to permeate through our digital landscape of procedural information and data, but we were able to straddle the two hemispheres of tradition and modern constructs of digital.
Thank you so much, Mark and Chris, and before Ludovic and Wade for your very insightful comments. I see that we already entered in the third question, which I will eliminate the first half because we already discussed this. But just before I proceed, I will invite the colleagues in the audience. If you have a question that you wish to pose to us, please take a note. And at the end, if we have time, I will yield the floor to each one of you to activate your video and your audio to pose the question to the colleagues. So allow me to follow up on this last specific topic that we were discussing about how to deal with the MPs, with the committees. And Chris, what measures have been taken on your side to clear to foster this clear communication or this human relationship, as you said, and to coordinate amongst not the members, but the different departments to ensure that they are not overlapping, duplicating requests, or they don't have conflicting requests? How can you efficiently manage that? How can you bring both from the administrative side, which is providing catering, events, and all those services that are not related to the core business of the legislative process, but also to the drafting, to the legislative process, to the procedural side, the answer. So how can you manage these different departments in a manner in that you coordinate their services to not duplicate them, to not have conflicting requests, and for efficiently and smoothly running a request from a user?
Well, I love this question, Luis, because I have the perfect example, something very real, poignant, and active. It's in progress in our organization right now. It's a true story. Is kind of like Ludovic mentioned on the back end in terms of product portfolio and service consolidation to be able to run let's say a leaner, meaner shop of products and services. We've done the same thing now, and it's still in progress for what we'll call our client care experience. And what had happened in the past, prior to our 2019 refresh of a strategic plan to push towards unified and seamless services for members of Parliament, their staff, and the administration, was to actually enact an organizational change, to consolidate many of our frontline service operators who handle requests for the campus services and then the corporate services and then IT services. So we had different phone numbers, different email addresses, different entry points for all these different services. Now, if I'm the poor client, and I've been the client because I'm a client too of these services, it's which number do I call when I need what? And how do I even know which number to call if I don't even know how they've labeled the service? So what we've done for the sake of helping our poor clients since 2019 towards this revolution that we're still pushing forward is we've created a universal, unified client care team. So these agents, these amazing level 1, first level support agents who have those amazing skills, client care skills, customer service skills, they're all in one team now. We've put them together. We've reduced drastically the number of phone numbers and all of the different email addresses. I couldn't even tell you, there are dozens and dozens of these into single points of entry for our clients. And when I say clients, I'm handling different personas here too. A member of parliament, their staff, a House of Commons administrative employee like myself, will serve each other based on the right profiles for what they need of those services. And the beauty of that model is we're giving a similar unified client experience for all services. So it's agnostic if, as you mentioned, Luis, it's a catering or food or hospitality service, or it's a legislative service or a drafting of a bill service. Is a member doesn't need to worry about where to go get it. They know where to, they just come to the one-stop shop. Even better is we layer on what we call the omni-channel experience. So it's not just about phone numbers or emails. We pride ourselves in the human touch. What we call the white glove or red carpet service is something we do in two or three major flavors. We have walk-up counters, genius bars, if you will, in all of our lobbies, where a member of parliament in passing or their staff in passing can reach out to any of our agents sitting right there and say, I would love to follow up on where I'm at with that service. I would like to ask for yet another service. The continuity of all those requests across all buildings, across all medias, are coming into a common platform for a common team who can then be dispatched to the service providers accordingly. And that's where someone like myself, who is an IT or digital service provider, may often from time to time get some of these more complicated requests, which come to the experts in the organization. So someone like myself who is taking care of a product organization, a digital delivery team, if one of these issues or requests coming from the front line is saying, we need help here, and this member of parliament is on our VIP list, and there's an issue here that we need to deal with. So we have very quick escalation channels to get to the right person at the right time through platforms, processes, and of course, people at the end who deliver these services. So I've got some more notes here, Luis, but I think that summarizes the my thoughts on this one.
Chris, I want to follow up on that. I promise you, this is not an IT panel, and I try to keep my promise. But I only have one question for you. In many cases, we've seen that users, how can I say this? They don't know how to explain the service they need. In many cases, do you see a possibility of AI to assist on that?
Luis, were you in my team town hall meeting yesterday? Because we talked about that exact question, actually. Yeah, let me jump right into it. It's the analogy of you go to your doctor and you say, Doc, this is what's wrong with me. And then your doctor says, just tell me what you're experiencing. And then let the doctor be the doctor, right? So we get that often is a misdiagnosis or misunderstanding initially, whether it's from the client or a frontline agent, where over time through the life of that service fulfillment, we're going to need to add and perfect the quality of what really is the request or the issue that we're trying to solve here. So yes, Luis, AI, we've started to look at some of its potential. Full disclosure, we have not even touched even a prototype of such a thing yet, but we're starting to see from an IT service management perspective, or ITSM as many like to call it, there is an abundance of capabilities in the modern platforms we're seeing where generative, suggestive, AI-assisted technology based on, of course, data, historical trends and interactions, customer behaviors and analytics of certain types, your services and typical things that could be seen where AI is starting to make interpretations and suggestions about how to reroute a call, to perfect or refine or add information to it. And no joke, this was something we covered in a show and tell yesterday at one of my internal events. So thank you for that question, Luis.
Thank you so much, Chris, for your response. Wade, would you like to share your comments on that, both on this matter of not duplicating requests, not to have conflicting requests, and of course, if you'd like to comment on this possibility of using AI as well for having an interaction with your users to be, as Chris said, the doctor between you and your users, to tell them, okay, what do you feel? Let me tell you what you need. So any thoughts on that, Wade?
Yes, thank you. And Chris, I would like to use your same format, kind of the 1, 2, 3 there, kind of because I think it helps me frame it as well. So on our side, kind of much of what I heard kind of about the team approach for us is about reducing silos across our departments. And what came together for us was the desire of our outside entities to be able to use the legislative data, download it and handle it in a bulk form. And we had been using XML, and that data was located in a variety of departments. And roughly 10 years ago or so, there began a set of meetings where people were brought together to resolve the download data in a bulk format so that outside folks could use it. You know, after all, it's government data and public data. And out of that developed working relationships. So that goes back to your observation on the importance of relationships. These were relationships with long-term institutional people who have a desire to see the institutions serve the members well and serve the publics well. And as we have worked together, that initial project has expanded. And we have made a number of improvements in terms of access of the United States Code, our statute compilations, our comparative print suite of tools. We've worked with the Library of Congress and provided more and more data to congress.gov. And so it has been the relationships and then the desire to collaborate and work together that has allowed us to then identify where we could get those kinds of single points of entry, where we could in effect defend what we're doing against others who wanted to see some other kind of solution where the technology was not sufficiently robust to actually accomplish our long-term goal. So you know, I think that has worked very well. For that number two, you know, kind of not departments, but coming from members and requests, and how do we deal with the duplication of requests? I too have a yesterday story. And it did happen yesterday. So a conversation that was arranged and I was having with two committee members on improving matters. I use the example of a lobbyist making the rounds for a request, and then our office receiving, you know, 5 or 10 requests of the same thing that the lobbyist was pushing, and us having to do the duplicate work on that. And it was really interesting to engage in that conversation because, as I mentioned earlier, the confidentiality we have with that member, often when that happens, what emerges back from our office is a bit different for each member because each member has heard that initial lobbyist request in a different way and ends up going a different direction, even if it's, you know, somewhat small in nature. And the members initially said, well, why don't you just tell us if they are duplicate requests and we can work together? And as we talk that through, they realize that they're in many ways in competition with each other, and that wasn't going to work. So it seemed to me that they ended up with, are there ways that their common interests can be identified? And so the requester actually come to a common group of people, and that group worked the idea so that out of that one request would come to us. So that seemed to be where they ended up. There are a number of people outside of Congress who are working on trying to identify those members who have common interests and develop an app, kind of where members could opt in and essentially find each other on issues. I think that approach has much more a promise than the attempt to put us in the middle. So a nonpartisan group who has the duty of confidentiality. How do I know when I can violate it and when I can't? So, I thought that was, just a really interesting way to follow that discussion. What happens now is that we do the work for each of them. The members will eventually find themselves and negotiate, but it's after we've done the work. So, I'm hopeful that long-term we can begin reducing the duplication there. And then AI, I think AI has some promise. I'm interested in learning more, but I have concerns. And with the particular makeup of member staff in particular, a lot of their staff, while smart, are young. In many cases, their jobs are the first ones that they've had out of college. And I'm really concerned that they will be coming to us with what appears to be a fairly well-formed, developed idea and say, this is what we want. Our mandate is to be faithful to the member's policy. And to get the policy, the member really has to have a combination of identifying the problem very well and the proposed solution that the member has, and then engaging with us as we work further to define that and express that in the written form that becomes a legislative measure. And requests coming to us that appears to be well-formed, well thought out, particularly if it has any length to it, I'm really concerned that will actually slow us down, not speed us up, because what do I do with it? Am I going to engage it and read it word for word? And then who am I going to ask to clarify things? If that aide is not able to do it, that aide is then going to back up the process somewhere else in the member's office or with the stakeholder groups. I'm interested, but I'm concerned.
Thank you so much, Wade, for your comments. I took a few notes here. Both you and Chris gave me ideas, but I will save it to the last question because it's about this topic. Otherwise, I'm jumping ahead of our planned schedule here. Mark, would you like to comment?
Sure. Yeah, a couple of quick comments that I think in some ways, the way you're talking about being in the middle between competing requests and requesters and so forth, we can find ourselves in that position as a provider. Pick up where there will be different requests from different product managers or different aspects of a project. And then you have the challenge of a VIP coming in saying, no, we should now go this way. One of the things that really has helped prevent that has been the spread and the growing use of agile methodologies in building technologies. In the not too old days, when you have a waterfall project, you would build all kinds of requirements, spend a lot of time on that, and then set up that you're going to take all those requirements and a big bang produce something that you design, and you build it, and it might take years to produce that thing. That intervening time is beautiful time for a VIP to come in or someone and say, no, the new priority is this, because what do you have to show for all of this big project we're working on? When you go in an agile way, which I think in some ways, right, as you described what's happened with both the task force and sort of moving forward through the various things that have resulted in standard, open standard for legislative data, setting comparative print program and so forth. In a lot of ways, that's been an agile effort because it's along the way towards something bigger. You've had things to show and work that has been produced that actually gets into production quicker. And that we have done a lot for keeping down the new requests. Like, can you do this? Can you do that? That cannot go off and you really do, because Agile allows you to give your users something along the way, and they're not waiting. So I think it's been a helpful development, and look forward to more governments are adopting it.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your comments. Ludovic, would you like to close this round with your thoughts?
Yeah, I can only say that I agree with what was mentioned from everybody. When I started this activity on portfolio management, I had two kind of behaviors. I had the IT side behaviors that says, well, IT knows better, right? We have the one who have designed the solution, we maintain them, we are there for years, business is changing, but we are still there. We have the solution, we build them. So we know what are the requirements, functional, non-functional. So we know better than them. That was one feeling. The other one on the other side, on the benefit, or let's say the requesters, the business side, they were saying, come on, how can I talk to these cavemen and cavewomen who have no clue what the business is? And this was a feeling on both sides. And when you have this kind of feeling, of course, you cannot progress that much because you have two different worlds that will confront each other. And then you really need to break the walls or break the silos that have been created for years within the organization. And to do that, you need to build a common ground so that people could work together with a sustainable approach and a common respect. If you don't have that, then you will never change this behavior of people looking one to each other. And that's exactly the principle of the white carpet, right? Let's say I'm at your service, I'm a service provider, you are my requesters, and I will welcome you, we will understand each other, I will take care respectfully for you, but in the same time, I will expose you my service catalog so that you know what you can request, you know under which conditions. It's an agreement we have together, and then please, while you are in this domain, come to me and we will talk to each other. And in order to break these silos, to break these behaviors, I had, let's say, an immense chance to have many face-to-face talks with the previous Secretary General, Klaus Wehler, on which we exchanged in my role as IT portfolio manager for the Parliament and his role as Secretary General, saying, okay, if you want to have a process which is sustainable within an organization, because you want to work over time, you have to make it systematized. And you have to making a result from a top management decision. So the top management decision has to agree on something. For instance, they have to agree on an approach, on processes, on roles and responsibilities that will be endorsed by the top management and then that will be applied by the administration. And in this case, once you have a decision coming from the highest level of your organization, it will be super hard to go against this decision that have been endorsed by the top management of the administration and recognize that this is the way to go. You could also include some VIP representatives, such as a vice president in charge of the domain that you are addressing, or vice president for IT, or vice president for buildings, depending on which domain or which service provider you are. And based on this one, you will have to create a certain number of rules. And we had, in fact, 2 entry points. Christopher mentioned that he has only 1 point of entry. In fact, in our case, we had created 2 entry points. One, well, even, I would say even 3, for service management on your service catalog, things that you can deliver in a repetitive mode. You had on one side, 1 service point, 1 single point of contact for the members, and another single point of contact for the administration. So we have 2 single points of contacts. Why that? Well, because first, when you are a member, you expect to have an answer in your own language within the parliament, 24 languages. Of course, you need to answer to the member. He will largely appreciate to answer in his own language. You don't have to force everybody to speak French or English or German or whatever language it is. So you have to expose to multilingualism. And then when a member has an issue and say, okay, I've lost my voting card and I need something right now because I need to go to a vote, you need to provide now. You don't need to say, well, dear member, I will create a ticket and I will assign it to a team and someone will come and try to meet you in a corridor, or you may receive a phone call. Okay, no, I'm in this place, please give me my card because I need to go back to the hemicycle. And in this case, the response time that you have to provide for members or for the administration has nothing compared, with all respect to the colleagues, but it has nothing compared. So we have these 2 points. And then we have another one for the change management and solution, IT solutions to be provided. And this is another one which is attached to the portfolio management. And there we have 2 groups. We have the portfolio managers from the IT side that will maintain the integrity of the process. And on the other side, you've got point of contacts within each, let's say, directorate generals in the parliament and political groups. But let's say each of the main business lines, whether they are based on functions or based on organization or structure, that will be trained into this approach saying, okay, you need to describe things, okay, but we need to understand each other exactly what you meant. Can we use AI for that? I can tell you that at least within the European Parliament, ages from that. We are using generative AI in other domains, you know them, but not for this one. It's far from here. There we have business analysts. These are the people who have been trained in order to express requirements and to accompany projects with the knowledge of the business line so that they can then request things to a service provider that will be the IT side, in this case, and that will have the same language. They will talk the same way together and they will work. And that's super important in project management side when the idea will be accepted by having on both sides, on the business project manager and the IT project manager, having in permanently a double head on the project that they ensure that the scope is still understood by everybody. And when you have multiple demands, how to manage that? That's one single point of contact for your portfolio manager. Everybody goes through the same pipeline, whether you are a business analyst from one director general or from a political group or, let's say, from members, you are streamlined into one pipeline. And with this team, which is specialized and knows which kind of answers or solutions could be applied for the type of demand and to be able to group them and how to make it known, this is through periodic, regular reviews. You take everybody on board, say, okay, this is my community. We need to know each other. We are working together. Sometimes we can share things, we can share solutions, or we can share problems. And in this case, we bring these people together and we have this periodic review to ensure what's new and the follow-up of the things that has been done. Sometimes if you have a lot of requests per, let's say, a point of contact, you can have a bilateral meeting with your point of contact to maintain, let's say, the follow-up on the points. But addressing things new is bringing two people together. You may do it one or several times. If you do it several times a year, we call that an agile portfolio management, because you meet them regularly and you try to review your pipeline and entry and way out. It's not that easy, but that's one way to do it. So that's how I would close this point or this question, I would say.
Thank you so much, Ludovic. I took a note on your example of asking the member to follow a request or a ticket in the system. I remember a study, I think it was in the US with the Congressional Management Foundation, that during the pandemic, chief of staffs, they were very happy that the members learned how to open a protected PDF, attach it to the email. So asking to follow a ticketing system, certainly, I wouldn't say that's a thing that would be on the normal circumstances for a member to do. I do have a last question, and just a point of order. We have 12 minutes to conclude our time, so I'll ask each one of you to answer in more or less 3 minutes, so we are on time. And I want to go back on this discussion that we had about with Chris, with Wade, Mark, and Ludovic as well, about AI or merging new technologies. let me follow the script here as just to guide you where I am. So, Mark, I'll ask you this question. As parliaments strive for modernization, robust tailored solutions like those provided by Xcential, they stand unparalleled in the landscape of legislative technology. With their blend of innovative technology tailored to the intricate demands of parliamentary operations, they offer an opportunity to revolutionize legislative drafting. So my question to you, as I had planned with the new elements, is in light of these modernizing efforts, how can traditional request management systems be optimized to fully harness the capabilities of advanced legislative technologies? And allow me to use the two examples I took note from Chris. Chris, please correct if I'm wrong, but what I was imagining was, let's say, a chatbot to help colleagues or to help users to understand their needs. Or for example, with the example Wade gave, it came to my mind a solution that would use content summarization between these requests that the Office of the Legislative Counsel would receive as well. So, Mark, how can these traditional processes can harness not these specific technologies that I mentioned, but how can we enable these traditional processes to be able to consider using these emerging technologies? What are the changes that we need to do to enable that?
Yeah, it's a complex and really interesting question. And then you throw AI in, and now what do we do? But I think and also thank you for the kind words about our technology. Kind of at the heart of what we do and the way we think about it, and it's not an original thought for us or really for any of the panelists here, is I think the important thing to do is to figure out how to digitize your process as far upstream as possible. And by that I mean, think about data first. Think about your documents as data. Think about for us, it's working with Xcential. So many jurisdictions we come to are not there. They're working with paper, then PDFs, Word files, and so forth, which can be very difficult, can be blockers to enable further modernization downstream or to bring other applications in. And so when we come in, we do as much as we can to bring excellent, to bring open standard structured data up and up. When you do that, then you can begin to bring all kinds of information, machine processing, and you can also create applications, whether it's working with comparative programs like Wade has mentioned, or other tools that can speed drafting, can give drafters much more time to work on substantive matters rather than formatting documents and so forth. So I think that's kind of the first thing that has to happen in modernization. But now you bring in thoughts about AI and what can happen. On the drafting side, of course, we're testing, playing with it, thinking about it, and so forth, and thinking about what can happen. But we know it's a long way from being something you have anything much to do with, because this is a human process. Politics and policy is human driven, shouldn't be machine driven. But there are things that AI can start to enable to create new efficiencies, create new ways to search, create new ways to better understand what you're trying to implement and to amend. But I think for us, I'm trying to make my answer brief here because we don't have a lot of time. The key is to really bring digitalization and a data approach as far upstream as possible. It doesn't have the possibilities. It can create downstream efficiencies. So I hope that this can kick off some discussion there.
Thank you so much, Mark, for your considerations. Chris, would you like to share your thoughts on this question as well?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, you called on Chris.
Chris or Wade? Sorry, Luis.
Oh, is it me or Chris?
It's Chris. Apologies
Okay.
for that. I just have to change a little bit the order here.
Okay. All right. I'll jump right in then. For the sake of time, is just to let everyone into our context of the opportunity for revolutionizing drafting, legislative drafting at the House of Commons of Canada. the last revolution we've had with anything in our legislative hemisphere of product, digital, let's say, capability, I would say is about 25 years ago, where we were really kind of at the precipice of the 2000, the Y2K era stuff. I was just a young lad back then, but it was an interesting time where that's where real initial digital I think transformation began, of moving truly paper and archaic legacy processes into an ability to even have an initial digital capability. And so what we did at that point was create a very comprehensive, monolithic, almost like an ERP, like an enterprise resource planning system around the legislative capability of our products and for our services. So over time, over these 25 years since, we've been stepwise refining and optimizing this platform, if you will. So it's a very bespoke, very customized, very intelligent, and very, very sophisticated platform that is enabling our entire ecosystem here at the House of Commons of Canada. So when it comes to the opportunity for another revolution, we've been in a sort of a pattern of maintaining, optimizing, life cycling this very large system. When we look to the future of our own opportunities from a digital perspective in my teams, in terms of roadmaps and looking at all of these great opportunities from AI to big data to machine learning to all of these concepts, we have no choice but to start looking more in breaking things down into smaller pieces, looking at the notion of modular, looking at composable architectures for the future, so that we're able to leverage parts, pieces of a puzzle that we can reassemble to take advantage of some of the more innate, specialized capabilities that are emerging in the industries around us. All that while maintaining the lights on in a legislature that surely cannot wait for any downtime. And I kind of liken it to pulling the tablecloth off of the table ever so carefully, so nothing is disturbed for the diners on the table. So that's another tough job for us as digital professionals with our partners to make that happen elegantly. So I would say we're in that discussion of looking towards the future with very positive, very open eyes around these opportunities. And just for instance, joining me at this conference is one of my colleagues later today. It depends where you are, but this afternoon for me. And Natalie Foster will be presenting an angle from her point of view as a clerk assistant, as someone truly in our procedural service business area, around which she also sees as these opportunities. So one of our core strategies at the House of Commons of Canada is really looking at our future as a digital business, not kind of like some of the adages we heard before of the caveman or cavewoman of IT. I'd like to think we've evolved out of the cave a little bit and understand the business of what we do here as well, or close to as much as any of our business service providers. And as stewards here together in, as I call it, partners in service delivery, whether it's from a digital specialization or procedural, legal, human resources, food and catering, is we're joining together to deliver these outcomes for the future. And above all, one of the things we must maintain throughout is our vision, which is truly that unified, seamless service experience. And while absolutely, even if we are starting to modularize things, we cannot remove that amazing ability of integration that we have today, because with one platform, everything speaks to each other, everything is integrated. And so as we look at building blocks of different possibilities for the future, we cannot sabotage that amazing existence that our service providers enjoy today with the integrative environment, and surely our customers, our clients who enjoy the great services we provide. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Chris, for your considerations. Wade, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
Yes, we are where Chris is as well. Chris, I think you described both our history and where we are in the future. And so let me just add in one element that I anticipate anyway being a challenge. That is that one of the things that the technology revolution has done is it has backed up where the work happens more and more to the creator. And now, as we on the institutional side are working with this kind of enterprise-wide system that we have, our interface with the member side is one of our big pain points. That's where they use Microsoft Word. As Mark mentioned, Word and XML don't particularly play together all that well. And as I envision the tool of the future and capturing more and more of the ideas and the creation on the member side, that is going to also put the member in a bit of a production side. That is going to be time out of that member's office, effort, education needed there. And our challenge, I suspect, is going to be, are we able to provide enough on the positive side for the member to be willing to invest their time and resources into the part of the process that will then enable us to pick up and collaborate with them better. So, I see that as our real challenge, whether AI is involved or not.
Thank you so much, Wade, for your considerations. Ludovic, I have a very difficult task for you to not only close this debate, this round, but to be the final consideration of the debate. So please feel free to use the floor for your considerations.
Yeah, I will take the last minute almost to close. And we are talking about AI and time management and how far we could, let's say, change the legislative support or legislative drafting. Just to give you my example, I was recruited in the European Parliament in 1999, and people told me, okay, you will be affected to a team that will develop an information system. It's called ITER. And you see, it's not that complex. And when I arrived, I realized that ITER was a legislative backbone that was not supposed to be complex, directly related to the rules of the European Parliament. So we developed the system, and that's at the heart of the work of the European Parliament. It was full Java at this time, you can imagine, in 1999. The internet was pretty young. HTML was 1.0, so it was full of Java and Java client. It was re-architected on the user experience side and deployed a couple of weeks ago. So 23 years after, the system was re-architected for a web-based interface compared to the Java one that, in this case, I can say I developed 24 years ago. So, well, no problem to talk about AI, to talk about modernization, but I would say things are quite slow on this side, and you cannot disrupt the business because at the heart of your work, that's your core business, and you need to manage this change. It was also managed before. Change management is super important. And there you touch the heart of your work. So AI, fine to think about it, of course. Why not writing amendments based on an AI system or generative AI you will use? You can ask, I don't know, Claude, Jurassic to ChatGPT, the model that you want. Please provide me an amendment to this law, to this legislative proposal, because I would like to be this one more in this way rather than the one it is inside, and it will propose you an amendment. So if you want to talk about AI on this side, I'm totally agree with you. I'm fair enough, we can do that. But in terms of, let's say, modernizing the legislative backbone and all the tools that support this one, well, I would be maybe not less optimistic than my colleagues, but it takes time, really time.
Thank you so much, Ludovic, for your final considerations. Just out of curiosity, we had a panel discussion on Tuesday about regulation of AI in parliaments, and a colleague from Wade, Mrs. Jessica Smith from the House Administration Committee, mentioned that her and another colleague found a letter from 10, 20 years ago about some guidelines on how the House should consider the use of internet. So now we are discussing certainly from 30, 40 years from now, colleagues will laugh at us also, oh, they were discussing AI at that time. So, well, thank you so much, all of you, for your participation. It was an absolute pleasure to have this panel discussion. And personally, I want to thank Waze for giving this idea for having this conversation during our last chat. It was something that it was a true pleasure to moderate, and also we see that's a topic that we need to engage more, to have more conversations about. So thank you so much, Wade. Thank you, Ludovic. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to Chris as well, and to all the colleagues that participated with us here today.